City councillors are getting back to work this week, tackling really big issues, including the next budget.
Yeah, all eyes on this. And for more on what that could look like, we're joined live in studio now by Jennifer Keesmaat, with President and CEO of Collective Marquee and former Chief Planner with the City of Toronto. It's always good to sit down with you. Thank you for joining us.
Great to be here.
So there's a lot to talk about here. I guess the question isn't if there will be a property tax hike, rather what it would look like. Olivia Chow certainly wasn't shy to talk about this on the campaign trail. What should Torontonians brace themselves for?
Well, look, the backdrop to this is really a decade of underinvestment in the city. That's part one. Part two is Olivia Chow, Mayor Chow, has been knocking on the door of the federal government saying, hey, you've got to come to the table. We're overburdened here. So you've got those two things as a backdrop. And then the third, you're absolutely right, in this campaign, Mayor Chow did the kind of audacious thing of saying, look, if we want to invest in our city, you're going to have to pay for it. There's going to have to be a tax increase. That was laid out bare in the context of this by-election that we had for mayor. So we now find ourselves in the moment of truth, really, where the budget chief has been going out and consulting with residents across the entire city. And the budget chief, Shelley Carroll, has been really signaling that we need to be prepared for something we're not used to seeing in this city, which is a pretty substantial tax increase.
Okay, so along with that, we're talking about not just a small budget deficit. This is huge, major. Just the property tax alone, that cannot be done in order to solve this. What else is on the table being looked at, and what should be considered?
Well, I think, the number one thing that's on the table right now is an ask to the federal government, this request to the federal government to step in and address some of the issues that Toronto faces as being the largest urban centre in the country, right? There's an outsized burden that this city carries with respect to absorbing refugees, as we ought to, with respect to immigration and the needs of new immigrants and the strain that new immigrants tend to put on social services. So there's this really big request to the federal government. That's kind of like the baseline that we see here right now. There's also a conversation that's been going on for several months now about other mechanisms that can be used that are enabled within the City of Toronto Act that the city can use in order to generate revenues. A parking levy, increasing the amount of money that you pay for parking. That is just a straight revenue stream for the city. It has a strong public policy outcome. You want to discourage driving, get people on public transit. That's an example of another type of tool that the city can be using in order to offset this really big gap that we see in the budget.
This is a two-part question for you. First of all, this is all going to be before the Budget Committee, before that big vote at City Hall next month. Before all this, the mayor engaged in pre-budget consultations. She said she really wanted to hear from the people of Toronto, and what they told her was that affordability is top of mind for them. They're concerned about that. So how does she do that and consider that while trying to raise taxes? What does that sweet spot look like for Olivia Chow?
Well, I'll give you an example of how this mayor has really pivoted and is very different from the previous mayors that we've had, in particular the last two mayors that we have. Affordability is a really big issue. So rather than saying, oh, I'm sorry, we're going to have to increase TTC fares, this mayor, this is the first mayor in the past decade that's done that, has said, no way. We're not going to put the burden of needing more revenue in the city on our TTC ridership. We're going to cap the fare increases. There will not be a fare increase. And on top of that, we're going to increase the level of service. So that's kind of taking a broader lens to the affordability question and ensuring that those that are most pressured with respect to finances have not only the services they need, like the transit, but actually a higher level of service.
Okay, and very quickly, if I may, Jennifer, you spent a lot of time at City Hall, so I do want to get your take on this. There's a lot of talk about 3.1%. That is what inflation is sitting at right now. A lot of people arguing that should be in line with what this tax hike looks like. What is a reasonable number, according to you?
Well, look, I haven't peeked behind the curtain, and as much as I'd like to be an expert on every line item in the municipal budget, I'm not. What I would expect is that number is much too low, given the magnitude of the delta that we see. I think people should be bracing themselves for a much higher increase. And I also think that when they see that increase, they should look out the window and look at the level of decline that we've seen in really basic infrastructure over the course of the past 10 years and say, look, we can't keep on like this. We have some of the lowest property taxes in the GTA. I think you should expect that number to be higher. I wouldn't hazard a guess at what it will be, but that
you
sounds,
think that's too low?
That sounds too conservative to me. Look, I'm just like the next guy. I want to pay as little tax as possible, but I also don't want to see the city crumble around my feet. I know that we all are going to have to do our part to ensure that we can continue to have a high level of service in this city. That number feels low to me. I would be happy if it was that number, but it feels low to me. I'm not sure how they're going to pull that off.
Okay, Jennifer Keesmaat, President and CEO of Collective Marquee and former Chief Planner with the City of Toronto. Thank you very much for your time and your insight this afternoon. We really appreciate that.